Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Last episode we did something really important. We dragged a hypothesis out into the daylight and gave it a first rough reality check. And that hypothesis, the first load-bearing beam in our model, is this a people's Drea civilization's way of understanding the world, and whether it can later build a stable world model, Z, even grow an entire civilizational paradigm, may be strongly related to how vowel-driven its native language is. And let me be clear again, this is not a conclusion. It's a correlation signal our model is pointing at. But the weird part is, it kind of matches reality. Not perfectly, but surprisingly often. Look at the classic source civilizations in history. The ones that didn't just survive, but actually generated civilization-level originalities. Ancient China, ancient India, ancient Greece. Early on, each of them produced whole stacks of abstractions, philosophical frameworks, religious systems, logic and argument structures, aesthetics. In plain terms, they weren't just good at living. They could literally build worldviews. And in our scoring model, the language interfaces behind those civilizations tend to be more vowel-driven, more singable, more rhythmic, more suited to compressing and transmitting abstract ideas orally. And don't laugh, early civilization wasn't powered by Google. A lot of knowledge back then survived because people could memorize it and recite it. Rhythm is an ancient compression algorithm. Now, look at many other regions of the world. Parts of the Americas, Australia, Southeast Asia, North Asia, and so on. Let me say this up front so nobody twists my words. Of course, these regions had culture, organization, and even brilliant moments in history. But inside our hypothesis framework, the pattern looks more like this. When the vowel-driven tendency of a language interface isn't that strong, it may be harder, at least in certain historical phases, for a civilization to spontaneously grow a fully closed, self-consistent, self-iterating original civilizational system. And that creates a very realistic fork in the road. If you can't generate a strong original paradigm internally, you still have to survive somehow. And historically, two common survival strategies show up again and again: expansion outward, push resources, people, technology, organizational power outward, or absorptions, import someone else's framework, install it into your system, and upgrade that way. It's like this: if you can't write an operating system from scratch, then you either buy an OS and install it, or you go out and grab hardware resources. You have to pick a way to stay alive. And there's a third option, way more brutal. If you're stuck in a place where there's no strong external civilization to absorb, and you also can't expand effectively, you can end up trapped. Over time, climate swings, resource pressure, external shocks, your system can stall, fracture, or fade out. And that's not slow progress. That's a civilization that never makes the leap. So the most savage intuition from last episode is basically this: a civilization doesn't survive just because it has smart people. It survives because it has a strong enough cognitive interface, a way to consistently generate new concepts, reorganize experience, and keep upgrading its world model. If that interface isn't strong enough, then you survive by expansion or absorption. And if neither works, you can hit the end of the road. Alright? Now, let's take a famous example of that. Isolated, can't fully leap type of civilization. Everyone's heard of it. The Maya. The Maya, a civilization that could calculate the sky. Picture this: a tropical rainforest. Humid like a giant pressure cooker, you're standing at the base of a massive stone pyramid, steep steps, endless stairs. Before sunrise, people are already lighting fires in the plaza. Smoke rises like they're sending signals to the heavens. and at the top stands someone, priest, astronomer, calendar keeper, whatever you want to call him, staring at the sky. He's not looking at the stars because they're pretty. He's trying to sync time, because in the Maya world, the sky isn't a backdrop. The sky is order. The sky is power. The sky is legitimacy. Coronations, wars, sacrifices, major rituals. Everything has to align with the heavens. If you can't align it, the king's sacred authority wobbles, and the entire social order wobbles with it. So what was the Maya superpower? One sentence: they could calculate the sky. They turned celestial motion into reusable cycles, especially Venus. When it appears, when it disappears, when it returns, they could build tables you could reuse like a machine. Even eclipses became something like predictable cyclical events. It sounds like mysticism today, but back then it wasn't. It was a time management engine for society. That's why people hear Maya and instantly goes, wait, how are they this advanced? And then, fast forward a couple hundred years, and the story flips. Something eerie happens silence. In many major Maya cities in the southern lowlands, you start seeing signs of a system going quiet, no new dated inscriptions on stela. Less palace expansion, a quieter plaza, dynastic records breaking. People didn't vanish overnight. Cities weren't nuked. It's more like the system started dropping frames, lagging, glitching, losing packets, until the city network couldn't hold and people withdrew. And the rainforest is brutally honest. Once people leave, nature takes it back. Stone steps grow moss. Roots wrap temples. Cities slowly become ruins. So the question is, why? My explanation in the style of this channel is the Maya were a civilization that basically maxed out the astronomy skill tree. But civilizational leap isn't a single subject exam, it's a full stack engineering project. If you can calculate the sky, that means you can treat the cosmos like a cyclical machine. But to carry a civilization over a historical cliff, you also need a whole set of supporting systems, a stable political organization that can run long-term institutions, that can mobilize resources and integrate people during crisis, robust survival knowledge. Agriculture, water systems, medicine, plus standardized transmission over generations and a knowledge chain that can keep upgrading itself, how to teach, how to write, how to accumulate, how to iterate, and yes, the Maya weren't missing everything. They had complexity, state, politics, wars and alliances, trade and craft production, and healing traditions and herbal knowledge. But from the materials, we can actually see one thing stands out. They're most systematized, most dominant, most civilization engine. Pillar looks like astronomy, scalendrix, and the other modules, especially the kind of cross-century, standardized, continuously upgrading theoretical skeleton you see in some old world civilizations, are much harder to identify at the same level. So when pressure stacked up, drought, resource strain, escalating warfare, internal turbulence. Calculating the sky couldn't save the ground system. The sky can be perfectly predictable while your reservoirs dry up. Venus can keep cycling while your food supply collapses. Your calendar can be flawless while your political system breaks first. One pillar can't hold the whole building. And the key point is this: the Maya were relatively isolated, more like a civilizational island. If you can't generate a full original paradigm internally, and you also don't have nearby systems you can absorb at scale, then even in a resource-rich rainforest, the long-term outcome can still be disappearance, at least of that high-density city network form. Now compare that with civilizations like ancient India, China, and Greece. Their strength wasn't just one skill point. They could generate abstract concepts and then build them into ethics, institutions, education, medicine, aesthetics, a whole world model. Write it down, transmit it, revise it. Take China as an example. Even if you think parts of its system feel outdated today, it has a terrifying trait historically. It can self-cohere for a long time. It can organize. It can replicate. It can keep operating. In ancient conditions, that self-consistent, fast-copyable, organizational power was absolutely advanced. So I'll end the Maya segment with a painful but useful sentence. The Maya weren't unintelligent. They just didn't cross the threshold of full-stack civilizational leap. They understood the sky, but couldn't keep the ground system stable enough for the next upgrade. Now the almost opposite sample, the Mongols. Alright, next sample, almost the mirror image. The Mongolian language in our table sits around 50. Not red, not blue, mid-green. Not strongly vowel-driven. By our model, that kind of interface usually isn't the easiest environment to spontaneously grow a fully closed, civilization-level original world model. Philosophy, ethics, politics, medicine, aesthetics, all stacking and self-iterating. And in reality, that's basically true. It didn't start that way. But here's the huge difference. The Maya are like an island in the rainforest. The Mongols are standing at a crossroads on the Eurasian continent. The steppe is basically the ancient world's highway system. No ocean walls. No massive rainforests as barriers. You graze here today, and tomorrow a neighboring tribe's cavalry might show up at your door. Information moves fast. Conflict moves fast. So I need to say something that people love to misunderstand. War is horrible. Death, destruction, displacement. There's nothing good about it. But in the early stages of civilization, a lot of cross-civilization knowledge transfer happened through war, migration, captives, and trade. You don't want to fight? Too bad. Someone else will come fight you. If you can't hold, your civilization breaks. And if you survive repeated pressure, your organization, mobilization, and absorption skills can be forced to evolve. That's why so many powerful civilizations today weren't raised in a greenhouse. Even China, often seen as geographically more enclosed, spent its entire history in constant confrontation with surrounding groups. As long as you're not wiped out, each shock and rebuild cycle often means more mature institutions, more integrated technology, more realistic cognition. It's a brutal filter survivors upgrade. And the Mongol story is the extreme version of upgrading under pressure. A lot of people imagine the Mongols just popped out of nowhere and steamrolled Eurasia overnight. No, their origin story was shaped by bigger powers constantly grinding them. In Tang-era records, many northern tribal groups were grouped under the name Shui, and one branch was called Mengwu Shui, often discussed as an early form connected to the later name Mongol. Meaning, early on, these were not an empire. They were more like a border tribe living between forest and steppe. Paid tribute, provide service, or become someone's buffer zone. You get drafted as frontier troops, scouts, cavalry. Sometimes you're literally sent to fight other steppe groups, steppe style, divide, and rule. You think you're just fighting, but you're being forced to learn how to organize cavalry, how to run logistics, how to read enemy formations, how to survive winter campaigns. Then the steppe enters the era of big players. The Kutan Liao rise. Then the Jurchen Jin overthrow the Liao. Different names, similar playbook. Divide the steppe. Attack whoever gets strong. Support whoever is weak. Never let the steppe unify. Especially under the Jin, the state needed steppe horses, furs, and manpower, but feared steppe unification. So they'd reward certain chiefs while feeding internal rivalries, supporting groups like the Tatars to check the Mongols. That's why the steppe became a constant internal pressure cooker, and in early Mongol history there's an infamous chain of feud memory. Ambagai Khan was betrayed, handed to the jinn, and executed brutally. In a nomadic society, a leader's death isn't a private tragedy. It becomes collective memory, something generations carry as a debt to settle. In that environment, who survives? Not the most polite, not the best at speeches, the ones who can organize, form alliances, and make choices under pressure. So when Temujin as Genghis Khan shows up, he's not mysterious destiny. He's more like a systems engineer forged by high-pressure conditions. A classic early example, around 1195 to 1196, the Jin launched campaigns against the Tatars. Temujin and the Karit leader Wang Khan Tugrul assisted the Jin. After victory, Temujin gained rewards, reputation, and resources, basically leveraging a stronger power to clear local obstacles. That move is extremely practical. He didn't challenge the Jin first. He cleaned up steppe rivals, built manpower and legitimacy, then unified. In other words, from day one, the Mongols were running the playbook of an absorption-type civilization. Maneuver around the strong, borrow their force, eat nearby competitors, turn others' rules into your resources. So yes, Mongol rise is tightly tied to the Jin pressure and manipulation, constantly reshuffled the steppe. Temujin survived the reshuffle and learned to turn war into an absorption and integration tool. Once he unified the steppe, what happened next? He turned around and hit the Jin as his first major target. In 1211, the Mongol-Jin War begins. After decades of conflict, the Jin are destroyed in 1234. And this step is absolutely crucial. If you only fight within the steppe, you might unify the steppe. But once you defeat a full agrarian empire, you gain access to an entire civilizational toolkit population, grain artisans, cities, engineering, administration. Your expansion capacity jumps from steppe level to empire level. Steppe cavalry is terrifying until it meets walls. But when you learn siege engineering, when you incorporate artisans into the military system, when you run taxation as logistics, your war stops being one raid, one payout. It becomes take territory, convert it into long-term supply. That's a major reason Mongol expansion could keep pushing west. Even the information system upgraded relay stations, laws organization, turning a nomadic coalition into something that can run like an imperial machine. So the Mongols didn't make the leap by slowly building a philosophical cathedral from the inside. They plugged external technologies, populations, and organizational experience into themselves, then upgraded into an expansion engine. So what does the Mongol case teach us? Language structure may influence a civilization's tendency toward original world model creation, but environment matters too. Mongolian sits mid-range. Originality may not be the strongest trait, but they lived in the most intense civilizational collision corridor on Earth. They didn't leap by thinking it all up. They leapt by learning how to integrate under conflict. The Maya could calculate the sky, but had fewer external interfaces to keep the system alive. The Mongols didn't necessarily generate a full internal stack, but they were surrounded by interfaces, forced to absorb, organize, and upgrade, and that leads to a brutal, realistic comparison. Civilization can be cruel. Some civilizations win through original genius, beautiful concepts, precise calendars, astonishing architecture. Like the Maya, you look at it today and think, this was done with stone tools and brains. In terms of civilization level originality in certain dimensions, the Maya can look higher than the Mongols. They feel like a genius-type civilization. Explosive imagination, deep specialization. But survival doesn't only depend on genius moments. It depends on system resilience. The Mongols were more like a fusion-type civilization, forged under pressure from birth, surrounded by strong systems, strong institutions, strong technologies. You can't avoid them. You either learn or you die. So through repeated conflict, alliances, absorption, integration, they welded external knowledge and organization into their own survival modules. And over time, they gained something that isn't one extreme skill, but the ability to persist. That's the cruel contrast. The Maya were brilliant, but that classical city network didn't make it over the cliff, and the rainforest swallowed the stage. The Mongols changed form, changed structure, changed identity over time, but as part of a civilizational chain, they survived into the present. Sigh, honestly, today's episode, I kind of feel like I got carried away again. What did I even talk about? A whole bunch of side roads. I actually planned to hit something more core, more exciting, but once I took this turn, it turned into a long setup episode. So we'll stop here for today. The main course I prepared, I'll save it for the next episode. It'll be more central and more fun. If you like this style, starting from a question, then laying out a logic chain until it can actually stand, please subscribe to the channel. See you next time.